There we are. Get that laptop open. Time to do the first of the month bills here at the Chris Jennings Memorial Hotel Room at the Collinsport Inn. Let's see, got to make sure I got enough time and money here. Got to be paying my rent to Mr. Wells. Got to make sure I have enough grocery and fish money, and let's see, car payment over here. What's this here? Oh, this file here. Gotta open that. So.
You look surprised to see me, Alan. Oh, yes. I know who you are. Look into my eyes. Look deeper and deeper into my eyes. You're in my power now, Alan. And you're going to do as I say. Do you understand? Good. What I want is another episode of Collinsport After Dark. You'll do that for me, won't you?
Yeah, I understand. Oh, yeah, hey, I'll do that for you. What was all that about? I ain't sure, but I think I better do what I'm told here. So here we go. Episode 8 of Collinsport After Dark. Hit the intro. Welcome to Collinsport After Dark. This is a Dark Shadows podcast. With your host, Alan Gallant. And of course the whole host of things that go bump in the night. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the latest episode of Collinsport After Dark.
This is an ABC color presentation.
Spirit of darkness, spirit of snarkness, spirit of farce, bring to me the sacred tome, the origins of Dark Shadows marketing to teenagers. Here it is. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, my name is Evan Hanley, and tonight I will be your semi-host for a section of Collinsport After Dark, Episode 8. Behind the 8 ball, if you will. 16 magazine. The year was 1968. And a whole new avenue of promotion was about to be laid open for Dan Curtis Productions. In New York City, a teen magazine called 16 was being edited by a lady by the name of Gloria Stavers. And before the middle of 1968, no one knew what a powerful alliance there would be between Miss Stavers and Dan Curtis Productions, particularly Dark Shadows. And now, with further information on this unique phenomenon of 1968 through 1971. Here is your host, Alan Gallant. I swear to God, that guy gets weirder every time I see him. Well, in order to fully understand the relationship between Dark Shadows and the 16 magazine, which was only a few blocks down the street in NYC, that's New York City for all you folks who might not know, we got to go into a little detail about what 16 was and who ran it. Well, a lot of the information can be found in this lovely little book called Who's Your Fave, Rave, which came out in the late 1990s and was written by Randi Reisfeld and Danny Fields, who both worked at 16 magazine, and both had a lot to say about the formative years of 16 magazine, the late 1950s, all through the 60s, when a woman by the name of Gloria Stavers ran the entire show for the owners of 16 magazine. Now, 16 magazine started out as a one-shot, I believe in 1957, featuring Elvis Presley. But it sold out so fast that the owners decided, well, maybe we should make this sort of a regular publication. So they did. And of course, they had all the favorite teen heartthrobs, and the audience for this particular publication was essentially young girls between the ages of 10 and 13 or 14. In spite of the title, most young girls by the age of 16 had outgrown the kind of fantasy stories and ooh la la, my favorite TV star kind of passions by the time they were 16 years old. So once Gloria Stavers took over at 16 magazine, which she did in the late 1950s, the whole thing really took off. She understood her audience. She understood what they wanted, that they wanted a wholesome fantasy about their favorite young men, either singers or actors or musicians, what have you. And so that's what she gave them over the years. Dark Shadows was a very unusual foray for Miss Stavers in 16 magazine, in that it was an afternoon TV show, and a lot of the people that starred in it weren't cute young men. They were middle-aged people, like Jonathan Frid, for instance. So I'd like to read you a little section of this book, Who's Your Fave, Rave? You can buy it on eBay now. It's out of print, but it's still commonly found. And I'll read you a little section here on Miss Gloria Stavers. Okay? Let me see if I can find that. Okay, here we are. Gloria Stavers. Now, 16 was conceived by four men by the name of Chambron, Hall, and Waller, but Gloria Stavers is the one that really gave the magazine life. She was the heart and soul of 16 magazine, and although she left in 1975 and the publication had undergone changes in ownership and editorship, her spirit remains at its core. Now, when this book was published, 16 was still being published, but I believe in 2001 it finally stopped being published. Gloria never owned the publication in a legal sense, but she owned it morally, emotionally, and creatively. Everything 16 ever was, it was because of her. Born in Wilmington, North Carolina in October of 1926, Gloria Gonzales grew up in the nearby town of Goldsboro. She was a gawky little girl who was a complex combination of insecurities coupled with brazenness. She had a boldness fueled by big dreams. After high school, she married a man named Frank Stavridis. She shortened it to Stavers when she became a model. Primarily to get away from Goldsboro, and lived with him first in Washington, D.C., and then in Ithaca, New York. Bored with marriage, frank, and domesticity, she packed up one day and moved to New York City. With her name minus the addy, and so it became Stavers, and only her beauty and brains to rely on. They served her well for the next 17 or so years. As a runway and photographer's model on the fringes of the New York jet set in the 1950s, Gloria hung out at El Morocco, which is that was a big-time club there in New York, where she rubbed sequins gowns and sleek elbows with Marilyn Monroe and Mickey Mantle, this being the late 50s, with whom it is rumored she had an affair, by the way. Gloria was a star in nightlife world of beautiful girls, celebrities, and immensely rich, older, often European men. Now, she had health problems, and so she had to quit modeling, and so she took a ticky-tacky job with 16 magazine, basically going through letter files and figuring out which ones to answer and in the magazine, and they paid her 50 cents an hour to do that. Within less than a year, she was made editor-in-chief of the entire magazine due to her long vision for the magazine and her ability to understand these young girls that were actually buying this magazine for 25 to 35 cents off the newsstands at the time. Okay, so that initial job was well below her intellect or her interests, but she used it to climb the ladder to become basically the boss of the whole operation. Not the owner, but the boss. Gloria collected a list of the most commonly asked fan questions and went forth bravely, knocking on the doors of young stars of the day. Here's where the brazenness came in. In a series of appointments set up by their press agents, Gloria would then ask these questions. That first list of questions, compiled from the letters Gloria had been reading, eventually became the 16 staple 40 intimate questions. Now, a lot of the Dark Shadow stars got asked these 40 intimate questions, and they were published in the magazine. Gloria's approach was instantly successful. She began to make a name for herself in the entertainment industry, and in the process, she gave the magazine an identity and very impressive sales, which, of course, is the bottom line. Late in 1958, Chambrin, one of the owners, appointed her editor-in-chief of 16 magazine. She had no journalistic training, and 16 was never journalistically correct, not in terms of balance anyway. There were no reviews except glowing reviews. If Gloria liked you, you got in the magazine and she promoted you. This became part of the arm of all of these stars' PR, because if she saw potential in anybody to be popular among her readers, would market the living heck out of your client if you happen to be an agent for a star or a musician or a soap opera star in some cases, that especially that famous soap opera that we all love. So there is essentially a little bit of how Gloria Stavers came to power at 16 magazine and what her passion was for her readers, and her power in marketing all of these up-and-comers in the entertainment business. Now, nobody knew much about Dark Shadows in the world of teens, except for those, of course, that were watching it. But in media, nobody paid much attention to it till 1968. And it was in the spring of 1968 where Dark Shadows came to the attention of Gloria Stavers and 16 magazine. Now, the West Coast magazines like Tiger Beat, which was another teen magazine of its time, would eventually come around to Dark Shadows, but not for a little while, probably not until really into 1969. And by no means were they as enthusiastic as Stavers was at 16, which is why we're concentrating on that idea in this particular episode. So, what did Gloria Stavers do? Well, she or a photographer would go down to Studio 16 at 433 West 53rd Street and interview these young and sometimes middle-aged stars of the show, and do their 40 questions and take pictures of them and begin to feature them in their magazine. Now, what I would like to do now is give you sort of a smorgasbord of some of the articles visually, that took place in 16 magazine during these halcyon days of 1969, 1968, 69, 70. And you can see for yourself how this would have absolutely been a boon to Dan Curtis Productions and ABC in terms of the coverage that they got for these young people that would be tuning into the show and keeping the interest high and keeping the return viewership high as well. So, without further ado, Mr. Music, we're ready, please. And here comes a little compendium of visual art and articles from 16 magazine. there you have a nice little sampling of the kind of PR work that Miss Gloria Stavers did for Dan Curtis and ABC and Dark Shadows over a period of about 3 years. Starting in mid-68 and finishing up in 1971 with the Night of Dark Shadows film. They still featured it a few times in the magazine at that point. Well, now what I would like to do is have a few selections from 16 magazine. Obviously, we're not going to go through all the dozens and dozens magazines here, but I'd like to show you some of the critical ones, some of the more jam-packed ones, if you would. But I'm going to start with a modest beginning, and we'll go from there. First one I want to do is the very first one that they did, and that's June of 1968. So, let's begin. Now, before we get started with the promotional value of 16 magazine, let's talk about some other promotions, like this one where Jonathan Frid appeared in June of 1968 at Stern Brothers Department Store. There were also other personal appearances, including at the Devon Horse Show on May 24th, 1969, and a previous appearance in 68. Then there was the 10-city Whirlwind Tour in May of 1968, in which Jonathan was on a Learjet from city to city for about a week. Also, in the Philadelphia Inquirer of July 28, 1968, a promotional poster was offered to young and old, as well as local and national TV guides. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't things specifically for the kids, as we've talked about the Dark Shadows Vampire Fan Club in the past on one of our other episodes. Now, this is Our Lady of 16 magazine. This is Gloria Stavers. And if you notice in this picture, there's a picture of the werewolf in the background, and there's also a picture of Don Briscoe as Tim Shaw right there. So we're in 1969 when this picture was taken. Let me read from Who's Your Fave, Rave by Reisfeld and Fields again. Up until Dark Shadows, the conventional wisdom had been that 16's young readers did not follow afternoon TV. They were in school during the hours of broadcast, and with the exception of specific after-school programming geared to them like American Bandstand and later Soul Train, they pretty much didn't. The magazine received little if any mail on the soap opera stars of the era. All that changed with Dark Shadows. The ABC TV occult-accented serial, populated with vampires, monsters, mad doctors, and witches, grabbed America's teens by the imagination and bit down hard. It was helped along starting in 1968, though the show had been airing since 1966, by 16 magazine. The show's producer Dan Curtis was well aware of 16's influence and still treasures the 68, 69, and 70 GG Gold Star Awards bestowed on the serial by 16 in the most popular TV show category. At the publication of this book, Dan Curtis was still with us. In a recent interview for this book, he said, the enthusiastic support of editor Gloria Stavers and her 16 magazine staff gave Dark Shadows a tremendous boost with teenage viewers. The coverage in a publication such as 16 was never anticipated, but soon it became apparent that housewives weren't the only ones watching. Writing about Dark Shadows was something altogether new for Gloria Stavers and her young staff, for the show had few actors who fell into the teen idol mold. At the time, the magazine's meat and potatoes were the made-for-mania monkeys, cuddly cowsills, and perennially hunky Bobby Sherman. None of the Dark Shadows actors, with the exception of David Hennessy, was particularly young, cute, or about to strap a guitar on. But once Gloria began to get mail on Dark Shadows, she embraced the show and made it 16's own. One thing to remember about the monthly time stamp on 16 magazine and its sister publication 16 Spec, or Special, is that the magazine actually hit the newsstands between 5 and 6 weeks before the date on the cover. So in the case of this June magazine, it would have hit the newsstands probably in mid to late April of 1968. And here is the auspicious debut of Dark Shadows in 16 magazine in June of 1968. Here we see it, Chills with Jonathan Barnabas Frid, with a photography from episode 331, which was taped on September 21st, 1967, and provided extensive publicity photos for a variety of newspapers, magazines, and of course, 16 magazine. This tiny beginning for 16 magazine belied the later full-blown coverage that would be experienced between later 1968 all the way through 1970 and into 1971. And Frid and the cast make their first appearance in 16 Spec magazine in the spring 1968 issue. And this issue features Frid and the entire cast here in Meet Jonathan Frid, the Ghoul the girls all go for. Also, that year in the summer Spec, we start to see the lurid poster type printouts and short articles, Dark Shadows, 15 Fiendish Facts, as Gloria Stavers is filling in her charges on the details of the show. And here is the fall 1968 Spec magazine. And this features another lurid Frid poster and then Jonathan Frid's mystery guest. And we see various mixers during 1968, including the Drake Hotel mixer. Now here we have a regular 16 magazine, which has the article, Frid and Friends, We're Not Freaks, cashing in on the idea of the freakish characters on the show. Here is the August 16 magazine, which features 40 spooky questions, which is one of the standard formats that Gloria Stavers became famous for in the pages of her magazine. And as we begin our foray into 1969, here we see Gloria Stavers with the wonderful Werewolf of Dark Shadows, Alex Stevens. Rehearsal for episode 699, taped on the 20th of February of 1969. And here we are at the January issue of 16 magazine, 1969, which would have been on the newsstands in mid to late November of 69. Here we have some photographs on an initial article from the inside cover of this magazine. And if you notice the picture on the upper left, you're seeing Jonathan Frid going into rehearsal after taping episode 564 to rehearse for 565. Now, 564 would have been taped on August 15th of 1968. And right next to that is a picture from the famous photo shoot of 532, 533, which took place on June 27th, 1968. As you can tell, we're still deep in 1968 in some of these because this magazine was actually published in later 1968. Now, in the lower right-hand corner of this page, we see Maggie and Tom, and also Nicholas Blair and Nurse, from episode 563, which was taped on August 14th, 1968. And Estrado, Frid, Briscoe, and the Keeper of the Flame at Dark Shadows production secretary Diane Peliotta, also from that episode 563. And in the first two pictures on the second page of this article, we see Humbert Estrado and Jonathan Frid and Don Briscoe in rehearsal for episode 563. Then we see a contemporary picture of Thayer David and Catherine Lee Scott, and a shot from episode 331 featuring Joan Bennett and David Hennessy. And then we have Briscoe, Davis, and Frid in an evening read for episode 565, which took place after rehearsal and taping of episode 564, again on August 15th, 1968. Then you see John Carlin and Joel Crothers rehearsing for 564. It's an evening read, which took place after the taping of 563, which happened on the 14th of August, 1968. And on page 3 of the article, we see a picture from the early vampire episodes for Lara Parker as Angelique. Next to that is Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins from episode 465 after returning from 1795. And after that is Adam during the famous photo shoot of 532, 533, which took place on June 27th, 1968. Below that is a picture of Marie Wallace in her softball uniform sometime probably in the summer of 68. And next to that is Don Briscoe and Grayson Hall after 564 for the read for 565. So that would have taken place in the evening of the 15th of August, 1968. And also the two pictures of Frid and one with Frid and Hall also took place on that date. Since this photo story had a couple of dates that coincide with episodes on Dark Shadows, let's have a brief scene from episode 563 and one from 564. Here are two scenes from episode 563.
Excuse me.
Where are you going?
In to see Mr. Jennings.
Are you a relative?
No, I'm his lawyer.
Sorry.
But I must see him. Now, I know you have very strict orders, and I understand. But it is absolutely imperative that I
Mr.
speak...
Blair.
Hello, Maggie.
Well, how nice of you to stop by and ask about Tom.
They won't let me in.
Really? Is he serious?
No, he's improving.
Oh, thank goodness. May I put these flowers in his room?
Of course, Maggie.
Thank you.
I don't understand. You let Miss Evans in.
She has permission from the doctor.
Tom? Tom? Tom, it's Maggie.
Maggie.
Joe and I have been here every day. We're so glad that you're getting better.
Maggie?
Yes. Joe's working, but he'll stop by tonight. Is there anything you want him to bring you? You're going to be all right now, Tom. We're both so relieved that you're going to be all right.
Maggie.
What is it, Tom?
Coffin.
What?
Room, the coffin.
Coffin?
I know very well.
And
I
here
am
are two
very
scenes
well
from
aware
episode
of the risks
564.
even more than you.
Even if you bring this person to life, well, who's going to be the life force for it, like you was for Adam? Now, you tell me that. Who's that going to be?
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, Barnabas, I don't want anything to do with it. Anything at all.
Willie, you're already involved. It's too late to cry about it now.
Huh? What? Who's that? Somebody just coming upstairs.
Well, go see Willie. Go see who it is. Willie, you're getting nervous again. You must learn to control it. Remember the last time.
I just want you to know one thing, Barnabas. If that's Adam up there, or if I ever go up there and I find Adam, I'll kill him, even if you won't.
No. I'm not going. I'm not.
Joe, I've been looking for you.
Why? What's happened? Something else happened?
No, nothing's happened. I was worried about you.
And don't worry about me.
Well, I've been worried ever since this
Look,
morning.
Dr. Hoffman, I can take care of myself.
Yes, I know you can, but I've been worried. I went to your house and to Maggie's.
Why'd you do that?
Well, I know how depressed you are.
If I am, I'm the only one that can do anything about it.
Well, that's not true. You won't help yourself being in this graveyard, the storm coming up. I wish you'd come to Collinwood with me.
In the February 1969 issue of 16 magazine, we have the first chapter of The Whole True Story of Dark Shadows with a very colorful picture of the cast, and then a recap of where the cast is there in 1968 into 1969. By April of 1969, 16 begins to ramp up its coverage, although it's still in 1968 in terms of its stories and photographs. Here's David Hennessy squealing on the Dark Shadows gang. Here's a great picture, three-color picture, accompanying another chapter of The Whole True Story of Dark Shadows. And then finally we start to get pictures of Frid and other cast members offered as premiums in the pages of the magazine if you mail in. And here we have the fabulous June issue of 16 magazine, in which Dawn Briscoe's hates and loves are discussed, and the picture next to those hates and loves is from episode 673, taped on January 15th, 1969.
Yes.
It's
Point blank.
But it still didn't die.
No.
But you said...
I know what I told you. The blast from that gun should have killed any living creature. And it should have.
Barnabas.
That must be Chris.
Chris?
Yes, I was stopped by the cottage. I told him about Carol.
Mr. Collins? Oh, thank you.
Chris, you're all right.
Yes, I'm fine. I'm worried about Carolyn, naturally.
I've been worried about you.
Well, there's no need to. He spent the entire night quietly in his cottage.
Yeah, I was just sleeping through all the excitement. I wish someone could have told me. I feel that there was something I might have been able to do.
But...
Yes, Dr. Hoffman?
Oh, nothing. Nothing. I'm sure you want to see Carolyn. She's awake now.
And here, the hates and loves of Jonathan Frid, and a picture that was taken probably during a break in taping 694, February 14th, 1969.
A man. A man in my dream.
Stop this, David. Now, tell me the truth.
Barnabas, it's Roger. Is David in there with you? So there you are. What a fright you gave us. What do you mean running out of the house? Didn't you hear me calling after you? What kind of behavior is this?
Roger, I think under the circumstances, one question at a time would be enough. Now come in and calm down.
Thank you, no, Barnabas. We're going back to Collinsport.
And finally, this premium was also offered probably around this time. This beautiful poster featuring Frid with the cast surrounding him was a mail-in offer, probably cost you $1. And you probably got this lovely poster, maybe a couple of other items. Here we see the July cover of 16 magazine from 1969, and there's some foreshadowing of the 1897 craziness to come with a small picture of David Selby as Quentin. And here we have a nice three-color picture of Frid, Moltke, Catherine Lee Scott, and Grayson Hall, right next to another chapter of The Whole True Story of Dark Shadows, which features a picture of Dr. Lang, and also Jerry Lacey and others there. Now, One of the features that was in a lot of the Dark Shadows sections of 16 was My Life in Pics, and this one has Jonathan Frid, and it has some key pictures that probably weren't seen much before this. We know them all well as Dark Shadows fans in the ensuing 50 or so years, but there's a picture of Jonathan with his grandfather. There's a picture of Jonathan in the Navy during World War II. Some Shakespeare pictures, a picture of him in a production of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as a native for the CBC. And finally, there's a picture of Jonathan as a very young man in a production of The Heiress up in Toronto many, many years ago. August 1969, and Quentin Mania is in full swing in the pages of 16 magazine. On the cover, there's a tiny little headshot of Don Briscoe. And inside, another fabulous three-color shot, an overlay of Quentin, and of course David Selby in his street clothes. The Quentin shot is from episode 714, taped on March 13th, 1969.
Go down to the drawing room. We'll get to the bottom of this soon enough. Either she's telling a monstrous lie
Edward, how can you say such a thing about our dear sister? Just look at her. You can see for yourself that an important change has taken place. Notice how much more erect she carries herself. And there is something curiously grand and imperial in the way she looks at us. Now I ask you, Edward, if she were lying about the will, would she be standing there looking for all the world like Catherine of Russia?
I am not amused, Quentin.
You rarely have been, Judith. It's always been one of your weaknesses.
Shall we go into the drawing room?
Oh, come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly.
And of course, the famous My Life in Pics section. This is part 2 of Jonathan Frid's life in pics, and it covers his career leading up to and just before Dark Shadows. Finally, the fabulous full-color, slick paper back cover of the August copy of 16 magazine. And here we see a multiplicity of characters, both from 1968 and mostly from 1897. We see Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins, shot taken from rehearsal of 5/32/33 on June 27th, 68. We see Nora, Tim, and Trask were taken during rehearsal of episode 735, April 11th, 1969.
Her punishment will come later.
I don't want to go up with him, Rachel.
I'll take her upstairs, please.
You forget your place so quickly, Miss Drummond. And besides, Timothy is here to offer you his apologies. He is filled with shame, I am sure. I wouldn't stop him telling you about it. Come, Nora. You are going to bed.
Oh, good night.
Well, I see once again he's succeeded in coming between you and I.
Jameson and Rachel were taken during rehearsal of 722, taped on March 25th, 1969.
Rachel, where am I? Rachel, where am I? Rachel, where am I?
And the big shot of Quentin was taken during rehearsal of 714, taped on March 13th, 1969. That last shot of David Selby as Quentin, taken on March 13th, 69, was taken on the same day as the Sweetheart of the Month Quentin shot previously shown.
Don't argue with me, Quentin. Go down to the drawing room. We'll get to the bottom of this soon enough. Either she's telling a monstrous lie
Edward, how can you say such a thing about our dear sister? Just look at her. You can see for yourself that an important change has taken place. Notice how much more erect she carries herself. And there is something curiously grand and imperial in the way she looks at us. Now I ask you, Edward, if she were lying about the will, would she be standing there looking for all the world like Catherine of Russia?
I am not amused, Quentin.
You rarely have been, Judith. It's always been one of your weaknesses.
Shall we go into the drawing room?
Oh, come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly.
Here we are in the September 1969 edition of 16 magazine, and even Denise Nickerson gets in on the act. If you look in the lower right-hand corner of this cover, you'll see a little picture of her as Nora. Now, inside we find another three-color extravaganza of Quentin Collins, the Q-Man, both in his werewolf, zombie, and sort of normal, but with a dagger in his chest. States. These pictures come from episode 721, which was taped on March 21st, 1969.
No, Wilkins. You're going to stay here and you're going to answer a lot of questions.
725, which was taped on March 28th, 1969. That's the full zombie look.
Can't come in here.
Must.
No, he can't. We have a visitor. Someone Edward sent.
Judith, it has changed. There is a small pulse beat. There wasn't before. He must be near Jameson. It is our only hope.
Jameson is with a visitor.
Are you willing to let him die again?
And then episode 699, which was taped on February 20th, 1969, and that's the full werewolf. Now, on the next page, would you spend a night with Quentin? Very spooky indeed. These pictures were taken from episode 763, which was taped on May 21st, 1969. These promotional shots took place in and around a scene where Quentin is transforming.
For a moment, should
Yes.
we hope
Yes.
that the nightmare is over and that the moon can go back to being something for lovers to watch? The moon can't be that. We spoke too soon. The gods have heard us. It's starting! It's starting! Don't come near me.
I can't leave you.
You must.
No. No.
Got to get out of this house before it happens.
You can't go out like...
And true to her word, Gloria Stavers was promoting Dark Shadows in every way possible, including the Dark Shadows LP, which was released July 5th, 1969. And this particular issue, September 16 magazine, would have actually hit the newsstands between mid to late July, so that timing was pretty darn good. Now, there was also a promotional video that appeared in episode 786, which was taped on June 23rd, 69, but was actually broadcast on the 30th of June, 69, just a few days before the album was released. Later on, the single I Want to Dance With You, featuring David Selby and Nancy Barrett, was released in early November of 1969 and was featured in a dream sequence in episode 873, which was taped on the 14th of October and aired on the 29th of October 1969. And here's a clip from episode 786.
But no one must know. But I don't think of it when you're here, when I can look at you and listen to my music.
What does the music mean to you?
What frees my soul, allows me to dream. Listen carefully, and you'll hear my dream. Shadows of the night, falling silently. Echo of the past, calling you to me.
Later in this issue, we see My Life in Pics by Jonathan Frid, the third and final installment, which shows you some shots and headshots from that period just before he became Barnabas Collins on Dark Shadows, and also includes a great shot of him as Caliban in the 1966 Old Globe San Francisco Shakespeare production of The Tempest. On the other page, Dark Shadows at Home, which became sort of a regular feature, the at-home feature on the 16 magazine docket. And in this case, it's Catherine Lee Scott in her New York apartment when she was still a single woman about town before her first marriage to photographer Ben Martin. And the October cover of 16 magazine features both Jonathan Frid as Barnabas and David Selby as Quentin on the cover. Now inside, another three-color extravaganza with David Selby and Jonathan Frid posing and telling all on each other. This was pretty typical of the time, these rather lurid headlines, and it turns out, of course, that they're just giving each other compliment after compliment. This picture was snapped sometime during rehearsal of episode 779, which was taped on June 10th, 1969.
Will I have a chance ever to right this wrong?
Very touching, Barnabas.
Angelique, what are you doing here?
I watch over you.
There's no need for you.
Isn't there?
I'm sorry. You surprised me.
Don't go.
I must.
Barnabas, listen to me just...
It's almost dawn. I must go, you know that.
I swear it. You must believe me. Quentin, I know who the vampire is. I swear it.
Well, then tell me.
It's Barnabas.
Barnabas. Barnabas. Our cousin that we never see in the day. Our cousin who always appears at dusk. Tell me exactly what you saw.
The continuation of this article, where they're telling all on each other, has a cool picture, which from other sources I've discovered was taken during the promotion of the recording of the original music from Dark Shadows Volume 1, which of course happened probably in May or June of 1969, as it was released on July 5th, 1969. Finally, in this issue of 16, we have Dawn Briscoe, one of the major heartthrobs after David Selby in particular. And there's a nice little photo story, and he's holding a copy of the August issue with a picture of him and David Selby on the back cover. And we see from this that this photo shoot was probably taken sometime between mid to late June or sometime in July, maybe, when the magazine would have been on the newsstands. There's also a picture of him in his so-called library. It looks like a book dump. He's just sitting there reading. And also he has one of those cool little, probably a Sony mini television set that apparently he keeps in a paper bag. From all of this, we can see that he probably lives in a very small apartment and kind of lives the bachelor life, so to speak, at the age of 28 or 29. And here we go with the back cover of this issue. And of course, it's David Quentin Selby in his full street regalia. And the fabulous November cover of 16 magazine, which would have come out in late September, has a picture of both Don Briscoe and David Selby on the cover. Now, Dreamsville was a popular feature, and once in a while, the Dark Shadows stars or a star would be one of the featured people who gave away prizes, which might be a tape recorder or some autographed scripts or something else like that. Of course, the whole true story of Dark Shadows feature, which sort of summarized, sometimes inaccurately, the goings-on. And here we have Dark Shadows Gossip that shows Jerry Lacey in his role as Bogey in Play It Again, Sam. In the up-to-date section, we see Don Briscoe and Michael Stroka, who makes his debut in 16 magazine, and they answer some questions about their favorite colors, etc., etc. And then the famous My Life in Pics, Chapter 1 by David Selby this time, and of course it features childhood photography and photography of him with his parents, etc. Some pretty cool stuff there, and would have been the first time that anybody probably would have seen this would be in the pages of 16 magazine. And from the previous Welcome to My Pad photo session, here is the back cover of the November issue of 16 magazine featuring Don Briscoe in his street clothes glory. The final installment of regular 16 magazine is the December issue, and here we see the cover with the moon on it, and two Dark Shadow stars are on it. You can see Michael Stroka and also David Selby. And DS reveals the things that scare us. Now, we've got some interesting pictures here. The picture of Barnabas Collins, a.k.a. Jonathan Frid, on the left, the three-color picture, is likely from episode 817, which was taped on August 5th, 1969. The Tim and Jameson picture to the right was probably during 813, which was taped on July 29th, 1969, and the picture of Nora is from episode 812, taped on July 28th, 1969. And the picture of Quentin is likely from episode 817, which was taped August 5th, 1969. The picture of Aristide, as portrayed by Michael Stroka, remains a mystery as of this recording. And Chapter 2 of My Life in Pics by David Selby is found in this issue, and he's still quite young in these pictures. Now, Frenchie Blanche was an artist that was used quite a lot in the pages of 16 magazine, and here she does excellent work showing the various sides of Quentin Collins. A beautiful full-color back cover multi-photo set shows various characters from the 1897 storyline. First we have David Hennessy as Jameson from episode 829. which was taped August 20th, 1969. Tim Shaw is portrayed by Don Briscoe from episode 820, which was taped on August 8th, 1969. Quentin, as portrayed by David Selby, from episode 817, which was taped on August 5th, 1969. And Aristide, as portrayed by Michael Stroka, episode 813, taped July 29th, 1969. But wait, just when you thought it was time to move on to all the teen passions of 1970, we still have 4 issues of 16 Spec from 1969. And here you see on the cover is Barnabas down in the lower right-hand corner. And here from episode 532-33, taped on June 27th, 1968, we see a beautiful full-color slick photo of Barnabas Collins, a.k.a. Jonathan Frid, with the accompanying article, My Secret Life. And more secret lives were awaiting you, including Roger Davis, Don Briscoe, John Carlin, and Catherine Lee Scott. And also, again, this would have been in late 1968 that this came out for the winter of 69. This particular issue also has all-star color portrait badges, and among them, of course, is our own Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins. Moving on to Spec Spring 1969. My goodness, there's no pictures of Dark Shadows people on the cover, but inside, plenty. Dark Shadows 1 by 1 gives vital information about each of these stars. Jonathan Frid, Don Briscoe, David Hennessy, Denise Nickerson, Catherine Lee Scott, and Lara Parker are all included where they have their favorite colors, etc., etc. Now, look at this beautiful full color picture. In the foreground is Jonathan Frid from episode 564, taped on August 15th, 1968. In the background is Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins from episode 276, taped on June 29th, 1967. And this article answers the burning question, does Jonathan Frid hide a bride? The answer is an emphatic no. And the pictures are taken on the set of episode 465, which was shot on April 1st, 1968. And here's Jonathan with Catherine Lee Scott. Here's the ever-popular Spectacles feature. And as you can see on the right-hand side, there's Jonathan Frid putting in his fangs from episode 331. And he's saying, there may be standard vampire equipment, but every time I sneeze, I bite my lower lip. And the cover of the Summertime Spec features David Hennessy seemingly springing on foot springs on the cover. And as we go into the opening page, we see Frenchie Blanche has created a likeness of Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins down on the right-hand side and the lower left of that right-hand side. And here, Dark Shadows Flashback 1897. Lots of great photos that were taken around the same time within about 15 episodes of each other. The top left group photo was taken during rehearsal of episode 721, which was March 21st, 69 taping. The 3 photos below were also taken on that day, as was the one of Lara Parker as Angelique, and also David Selby as Quentin, and the 2 below, Jerry Lacey as Trask and Diana Millay as Laura, were taken during episode 735, which was April 11th, 1969. Here's a picture of Nora on the upper left there, Denise Nickerson. That was also taken in episode 735. 722 was where the David Hennessy, Catherine Lee Scott picture was taken. That was shot on March 25th, 1969. The picture of Don Briscoe as Tim Shaw was shot somewhere in that same vicinity. The four-way, full-color glossy picture facing those photographs features Frid, Wallace, Davis, and Carlin. The first three are from episode 721, where John Carlin's picture is from 722. And this beautiful gatefold full-color picture of Jameson and Quentin, aka David Hennessy and David Selby, comes from episode 722. Again, that was recorded on March 25th, 1969. And as we leave 1969, here's the fall edition of Spec 16 magazine with 3 Dark Shadows pictures on it, including David Hennessy, Jonathan Frid, and Humbert Allen Estrado. Finally, David Quentin Selby gets the 40 intimate questions treatment, as you see a picture of him in regular dress and also in Quentin drag. And here he is with his wife, Chip. They're still married as of this date in 2024. And here is Would You Like to Be on Dark Shadows? Picture of Frid from episode 694, taped on February 14th, 1969. We've seen this picture a couple of times before. Here's Frenchie Blanche and her wonderful treatment of not only Frid, but also Lara Parker, David Selby, and Don Briscoe. And here we go. Jonathan and David cut a record album. You see some pictures of them together with a producer and also with Bob Cobert. These photos would have been taken in early June, at least according to the article accompanying them here, which is when the record would have been recorded. On the road with Jonathan Frid, and there's some key pictures from his May 1968 10-city tour, including with Bozo the Clown. And finally, our back cover features David Selby as Quentin from episode 767, which was taped on May 27th, 1969. Well, now that was quite a handful. And that was only the second half of 1968 and all of 1969, including all of the 16 magazines and all the 16 specs, courtesy of Editor-in-Chief Gloria Stavers. However, we still have 1970 and a bit of 1971 to go here, so we're going to break this up. And I'm going to stop here for episode 8 of Collinsport After Dark. And we're going to, in short order, issue a episode 9, which will feature the remaining storylines and pictures and new Fave Raves that happened in 1970. People like Jim Storm and Chris Pennock and, of course, Mike Stroker becomes an even bigger feature in many of the magazines, and by 1970 the West Coast is also starting to catch up, so I might throw in a couple examples there if I can find something here in my files over here against the wall here. I got some magazines and books and what have you, which will hopefully keep us all endlessly entertained over the next few years here at Collinsport After Dark. All right then, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to wrap this up now, and I got a few thank yous here. First of all, I want to give credit to Randi Reisfeld and Danny Fields, the authors of Who's Your Fave Rave, for some of the information on both Dark Shadows and, of course, Gloria Stavers. I want to let you know that a lot of the pictures that you saw today were from my personal collection of magazines, but I did get some various sources on the net through Google Pictures and whatnot. Most of them didn't have any accreditation to them. But one that I did use for information and pictures was the Collinsport Historical Society, and I highly recommend you go there. It is a great repository for a lot of wonderful information. It's got some great witty articles and so on, and that is definitely something that any Dark Shadows fan would want to get to. Also want to give a shout out to Katherine Gonzales, who supplied the audio at the beginning of this episode for the voice and laughter of Angelique. Thank you so much for that, Katherine. Much appreciated. And also the Dark Shadows Wiki gave me some information, dates and tape dates and episode numbers, corroborating those. So that was good. And GloriaStavers.com, which is a tribute website to none other than Gloria Stavers, also contributed a little bit of information there as well. And I'll put all of those in the description. So we'll have any and all of those that I just mentioned that have web presences down on there. As usual, the music for my initial run-through of various pictures was provided by Seeburg, general sort of muzak that I got from up on a YouTube. And it's from the time period, usually somewhere from 1966 to 1970. And I hope you enjoy that music. It's not exactly rock and roll, but we're going to have to do what we can do. All right then, so this is Alan Gallant here from the Chris Jennings Memorial Room at the Collinsport Inn, and I did manage to put together enough money to pay my rent this month, so I think we're going to be all right. And remember, the hat says B, and B is for Barnabas. Have a good time, and I'll see you next time. Roll end credits!